All right, so good morning and welcome to the Ohio Children's Trust Fund's 4th April Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar. My name is Nicole Silliman and I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Children's Trust Fund, and I'm excited to be here with you all for our final webinar presentation for April National Child Abuse Prevention Month. For those who couldn't join us for the previous webinars, I would like to share to all of you that we are celebrating our 40 years of service in the prevention space this year. We actually were recognized at the Ohio State House yesterday for those 40 years of service. In addition to that, we also launched this April a new awareness campaign that we hope to be promoting for future years as well. The Ensure They Shine campaign. Hopefully you've seen promotions on your social media pages as well as out in the public related to that campaign, but it really is about ensuring that all children shine and reach their full potential. You can learn more about this campaign as well as other activities by visiting our website at octf.ohio.gov, and we will also put a link in the chat. All of our recorded April webinars will also be on our website, so if there's any ones that you missed, feel free to visit the website and to watch those webinars. But before we start today, I want to review some housekeeping items. We kindly ask that you remain muted throughout the presentation. We will have time towards the end for questions. Also, this presentation, as I said, will be recorded and uploaded onto our website. So feel free to share it out after the fact or if you want to watch it again. And then if you need a certificate of attendance, please indicate so via the chat with your full name and your email address, and one of our team members will provide that to you after the presentation. But now I would like to introduce our presenter, Tammy, who is a clinician at Albany Counseling. A little bit about Tammy. She is the director of Albany Counseling Services and director for the Map Forward project. She is a level 1 neurosequential model of therapeutics certified clinician. Tammy founded the Map Forward project in 2018 to bring the most effective NEAR, which is neurobiology, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences, and resilience, science and tools, which is the NEAR Science and Tools, which is available to children and families of Ohio. The Map Forward project offers NMT brain map assessments, training and coaching and consultation and other services, and makes these services available to those most in need through a unique partnership with community organizations. We are excited to have Tammy share with us more information on the Map Forward project and a little bit about the work that they're doing in our communities. And so with that, I will turn it over to Tammy, and thank you all for being with us again.
Thank you, Nicole. It's lovely to be here with everyone this morning, and I do thank the Ohio Children's Trust Fund for inviting me to present this morning. I always love talking about the Map Forward project and the work that we're doing and the many exciting partnerships we've been developing. And I will be talking specifically about one of those partnerships here in just a few moments, and that is our partnership with Fairfield County Family, Children, and First Council. Towards the end of my presentation, I'll be briefly presenting another project that we've launched here in Athens County with the Appalachian Children Coalition. Nicole really did describe the Map Forward project pretty well. Basically, what we do, what we're trying to do, and we've been doing, well, for about 5 or 6 years now, since about 2018. Well, I guess, yeah, 6 years. Wow. We've assessed hundreds of kids in Ohio through contracts with Child Protective Services, Family and Children First Councils. We work with a lot of post-adoptive families in a number of counties. So we've been doing lots of assessments, but we sort of started ratcheting things up a few years ago with this idea that we would reach out to community organizations and see if there was a way for us to bring our tools and our expertise and our experience to the table to assist them in furthering their mission, and then us working together to identify resources for those programs and ideas. we actually, in some cases, will write the grant as long as, we're identified as the partnering organization. And so last year, when the OCTF grant came out, the Child Abuse Prevention Grant, we did partner with Fairfield County Family and Children First Council and in response to that RFP. And we were one of, I believe, 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, that were awarded that grant. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that project. We're still very much in the midst of it, but I'll share a little bit of exciting information, I think, about that project in a moment. I'm going to condense 25 years of research in the field of neurobiology into 3 slides, because I want to give just a few points about the neurosequential model of therapeutics for those of you who may not have heard of it. You may not have heard of the neurosequential model of therapeutics, but you've probably heard of Dr. Bruce Perry or brain mapping, but maybe you haven't heard of any of it. And I do want to tell you that there is a handout in the chat. I put it at the very top when I first came on, that provides an overview of NMT and some information about it being an evidence-based practice. So just a few key points. So as I said, the neurosequential model of therapeutics is an evidence-based, neuroscience-informed, developmentally sensitive approach to clinical problem solving. It was developed over the past 25 years by Dr. Bruce Perry and his colleagues at the Child Trauma Academy. It is not a specific intervention. It does not imply, endorse, or require any single therapeutic technique or method. So what is it then? It's a framework. And it's a framework that helps us understand a couple of things. First, how the interplay between adverse childhood experiences and relational health impacts the organization of the developing brain. 2, how that developmental history may be impacting current functioning. 3, what we can do about it. And 4, in what order should we do it? And for me, that is the most important piece of this. They're all important, but this was what really drew me to this model many years ago when I was working in community mental health, working with a lot of children that were going through, CPS. And, we would have kids come in the system with all these complex high needs, and we would just, with the best of intentions, just throw every service available at them. And of course, that was just a recipe for burnout for everyone, because these kids were often in foster homes with 4, 5, 6 other kids who also had high needs and many appointments. And very soon, kids, foster parents, service providers, everybody burn out, in part because we were not following the order of operations with our interventions, and so they aren't effective. And there's nothing that lends itself to burnout more than running around to a bunch of appointments that aren't working. So for me, this is a very important piece of this model. It gives us that order of operations. So my final slide on NMT, I just wanted to kind of review 4 foundational concepts of NMT. And the first is that the brain develops sequentially from the bottom up, and all input comes in from the bottom up. So can you see my cursor? So basically, input comes in either from the body or from the outside world through the senses, but all information comes in from the bottom up. And our interventions need to follow that same trajectory. We often start with cognitive behavioral therapy, which just doesn't work if a child has sensory integration and regulation issues going on. And then number 3, so the brain develops from the bottom up. Our interventions need to follow that trajectory. And number 3, the vital role of relational connection as both a buffer during times of adversity and in the healing process. Complex developmental trauma develops within interpersonal relationships and is healed through interpersonal relationships. That's a very core piece of this model. And then, of course, just this idea of neuroplasticity, which I find to be a very hopeful concept, because what it says is no matter how early, insults to the brain may have started, that with if we can help the child do some sensory integration work and learn to regulate and feel safe, we can teach skills and the child can learn and this brain can reorganize and heal. To me, that's the real hopeful message. lots of repetitions often involved in order to bring that about, but we can reorganize a disorganized brain if we use the correct order of operations and we provide enough repetitions of the intervention. Okay, I am sorry, I'm talking 90 miles a minute here. I'm going to try to present all this in 30 minutes and leave some time for question and answers. So some primary assessment tools were developed as a part of this framework. The first, we call the metric, but most people know it as a brain map. And I'm going to be showing you all these here in just a few minutes. And then there's the caregiver challenge estimator, which is the tool, which is a great tool. I'll show you later. And then the therapeutic web. This is not an assessment tool, but this is a document that we use to organize our individualized recommendations for the child. The brain map provides its own set of recommendations, but they're not individualized. They are for all children who fall within a certain score or range. They're evidence-based. They're all very good practices. Don't want to overlook them. But over here, we do our own set of individualized recommendations for the child that we're working with. People often, you know, when I call families and say, we're going to be doing a brain map on your child, they think we're going to hook the child up to a machine with electrodes and do some kind of EKG or EEG, and that's really not it at all. It's actually in many ways good old-fashioned social work. I mean, obviously there's some clinical components to it, but we at the Map Forward Project have a package. It's an assessment package, and we coordinate this process from beginning to end. That's part of the package. But we do a records review of all records that are provided to us. We go looking for records. We want as many records as possible. We do interviews of people. We usually end up doing 5 to 6 interviews of people who are familiar either with the child's history or their current functioning. We often interview the parents, the child. The school is always in there. Counselors, other service providers, caseworkers. And so we do interviews, and then we take all this information that we've collected through the records and the interviews, we go to the neurosequential network page, and we enter all this information in. There's over 300 questions that we have to answer, and it produces this beautiful report, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And then we create the therapeutic web, and then we get everyone back together in a team. Those we interviewed, and perhaps others other service providers who may have come on board, you know, recently, whoever the family would like to invite. And we have an hour Zoom meeting where we present our findings and recommendations. And then we have some follow-up services to just ensure that this information carries forward and is understood by all of the service provider settings. I often sit in on IEP meetings afterwards, or consult with a therapist to help create a care plan based on the brain map. We provide several hours of follow-up services as part of our package. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the partnership we are currently in the midst of. We're still very much in the midst of this grant, and it's called the Map Forward Project, Neuroscience for Hopeful Futures in Fairfield County. And we've been working closely. Obviously, the grantee was the Fairfield County Family and Children First Council, and we were the partnering organization. So this page right here, it really, in many ways, is a condensed version of our logic model, and the approach we took with this in responding to this RFP to say, here's how we are going to try to reduce child abuse. Our underlying assumption is that caregiver burden is directly correlated with child abuse. I think we can all agree on that. The research supports that. That was our underlying assumption. So we designed a program that basically said, by increasing caregiver resources and enhancing a child's functioning, thereby decreasing the demand being placed on that caregiver, we can significantly reduce overall caregiver burden and mitigate the risk of child abuse. We went on to say that we could impact child functioning and caregiver burden through the provision of trauma-informed assessments, that's the brain map, Developmentally sensitive trauma-informed recommendations, that's the therapeutic web, which you will see in a few moments. Training and education of family, schools, and community service providers. And then finally said we could measure our results utilizing some NMT tools, which we have just started doing. And I have a really great result to show you. So that's kind of our model in a nutshell. I wish the grant had been that short to write, but that's the condensed version. And our progress to date, we provided a community training in September in Fairfield County. That was a live training, and it was attended by both community service providers and educators. We have 2 additional school trainings scheduled for this summer. We have assessed or are in the process of assessing 20 of the 25 youth who are to receive the services through this grant. And we recently conducted our first 6-month post-test, and the results were very positive, and I'm about to show you those. So I am going to hop over here to some other documents. I'm going to show you some of these tools and show you some of the progress that we picked up on in this 6-month post-test. Now, these are, hang on a second here, this thing down here. I can't get my, there it is, get down here. I got to move my thing down here so I can see my tabs at the top. And it usually just drags right down, and it won't. Hang on just a second, please. Open the chat. So, okay, let me drag this down to the bottom so I can see my tabs. Okay. All right, there they are. So I'm going to show you some documents here. They're very complicated. I just want you to see what these look like. And I'm going to use pull a couple things out to demonstrate kind of how we designed our program and the progress we are making. These have been redacted. On one of the documents, if you read in great detail, there might still be some identifying information in there. So I'm going to just scroll over that one so fast you can't read. But let's start with the metric. And the only thing I really, this particular youth, first of all, let me tell you, this is a neurodivergent youth, and I'll have more to say about that in a moment. I also believe that this post-test, in all fairness and honesty, is going to be a bit of an outlier. I mean, talk about progress. The brain map was administered, the first brain map was administered in September, and then the post-test 6 months later in March. And again, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that we increased the child's functioning. Again, reducing the demand on the caregiver. And so I'm going to show, so we combine both of the maps into one document so that I can show you both. The brain map, the first page of the brain map looks at the history of the child and determines a developmental risk line by combining adverse experiences and relational health. We combine those and we get this developmental risk line. And as you can see, this particular youth has been in the high risk zone his entire life. When we get to page 2, just a couple of things I want to point out. I'm not going to go over all this stuff on the left. This is the key for that if you want to know what all these things mean. But I'm not going to be able to share these documents with you. If you're really interested in having one that doesn't have any identifying information on it, email me and I'll make sure that I send you a copy. But a couple of important things on this page. One of the things we measure is current relational health. And this is really important because we always say that if you do nothing else, if there aren't any services in your community or you're on long waiting lists and this and that, if you do nothing else, if you can improve this score, all of these other scores will go up. And again, there's that neuroplasticity, and it's so impacted by relational health. This is this child's, well, he's not a child, he's almost 18, current relational health, which is now in the adequate zone. But I want to tell you, on his first test in September, his score was only 34. He was down in the impoverished zone. It has come up, and I want to say primarily because after we did the initial assessment, a lot of incredible services were put in place, including a remote support services, which gave him lots of opportunities throughout the day to connect with different people and communicate. And I'm convinced, at least in part, I mean, there were other service providers involved doing very good work, and all of that came together and brought up this relational health score. And as you can see, folks, here's our first brain map. And here's our one 6 months later. Now, this color key thing, we're just going to look at this globally and not break it down into all the little boxes. But the greens are sort of a typical range. The yellows are moderate dysfunction, and the pinks and reds are severe dysfunction. And we don't see a lot of pinks or reds when we assess kids. But you can see with this young person we assessed in September, a lot of stuff going on, lots of problems, a lot of pink squares here. Here we are 6 months later. Look at this improvement. This is the age typical one below it. And because of his age, you know, the brain is 12 is the highest score you can get. So the brain is almost fully developed at this age. We still have some upper prefrontal cortex stuff developing, so we're not quite up to a 12. But you can see the improvement. So I believe that in this case, we demonstrated that we were able, through all of our interventions, to increase this child's functioning and thereby decrease the demand on the caregiver. So let's take the rest of the report, cortical modulation ratios, 4 functional domains, recommendations. We're not going to go into all of that because there's just not enough time. Here is the caregiver challenge estimator. And the caregiver burden score is this gray line. So this is the first one we did on this young person's primary caregiver. We did this in September. And basically the way we come up with this score is that we total up, we have a score for the caregivers in resources, both internal and external. Okay, and their resource score, and I can't go into all the scoring right now, but came up to be 162. Then we go over and look at the demand that the child or children in the home are placing on this caregiver. In this case, there is just one child in the home, but his issues were so significant that his score was 432. Well, you subtract 432 from the parents' resources, and we end up in a negative 270 in terms of the reserves that this care provider has in order to meet the needs of this youth. When we start getting down around 400, we expect placements to start disrupting. So we had some pretty significant, significant caregiver burden score going on in September. Let's take a look at March. Completely different picture. And the thing that is interesting to me about this is that the caregiver resources actually went down a little bit. You know, this particular parent did not take advantage of a lot of the parenting program. Fairfield County has wonderful parenting programs. They've invested heavily in training and certification, and all the families that went through this program were offered to be a part of these programs. This particular parent chose not to participate. But you know, he was cooperative with everything that, you know, with the other services, just didn't want to do the parenting piece. And his resources actually went down a little bit, but the demand, the child functioning went up so much from that 400 and something to a 63 that when we subtracted the demand from the resources, we got a reserve of positive 72. So I think we very much demonstrated that in this case, we were able to, by increasing the child functioning and our other services, we were able to bring up, you know, reduce the caregiver burden score. I mean, it actually came up, but from a negative, but we were able to reduce the caregiver burden and thereby decrease the likelihood of disruption of that placement, child abuse, you know, any number of things that might have happened had we continued on that trajectory. The final thing I want to show you, and I'm going to go over this very quickly, this is the therapeutic web. And as you can see, it is a very extensive document. A brain map on a child provide this document. And it consists of the text in black is kind of educational. And there's information in here for schools, families, counselors, community, for the individual child and the 4 domains of functioning of the brain. This is a very complex document. And this column on the right in gray, when we do the post-test 6 months later, then we also do a set of follow-up recommendations. So these were our initial recommendations. You can see, for example, here, this was for the school. We have a couple of pages here for the school. These were the initial recommendations, and these are the follow-up recommendations. So that is our therapeutic web document that we review when we, have our Zoom meeting and present our findings, recommendations. Okay, let me see. Can I get back? Am I back on my PowerPoint, Renee? Did I do it?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
You'll see the document.
Okay, hang on a second. All right, so let me go back to my PowerPoint. I'm not real slick with these, sorry. I can mostly get around, but I'm not good at going back and forth between one document and another. So where was I here? Oh, I just wanted to share a quote from one of the service providers in Fairfield County, who works in DD services. She said, brain mapping helped our team learn more about the individual we were helping. Each team member previously had different pieces to the person's puzzle. After the brain map, most of the puzzle pieces came together and we could see the entire picture. From there, we were able to determine where we needed to fill in services and support. Brain mapping also explained to the family the importance of being engaged with DD services. Since brain mapping, mom has been more engaged. You can see the PowerPoints, correct, Renee?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So the only other thing that I really wanted to mention is another new partnership that we have formed or are forming. We're in the very early stages of forming with the Appalachian Children Coalition down here in Athens County. The same kind of thing. We approached the Appalachian Children Coalition, said we think we can help you with your mission. Talk to us about what's going on in your world. And one of the things that the director there, Randy Light, shared with me was that they were getting, an overwhelming number of requests from schools for training and education related to mental health issues. And I mean, all over the board, bully prevention, eating disorders, depression, suicide, they wanted everything. And I came back and said, an idea to consider perhaps rather than trying to address all of these individual mental health issues is why don't we work on a project to help schools become more trauma informed, more aware of adverse childhood experiences and how these impact the developing brain, bring the brain science into the arena, and help them create more trauma-informed schools, but not in a way where we're coming in and saying, oh, here's one more thing for you to do. But instead, one of the recommendations that I had for Randy was that we connect or intersect with the PBIS guidelines coming down from the state, and that's positive-based interventions and supports. I don't know if they're mandates or guidelines, recommendations, but they're coming down and people are trying to meet them. And I suggested that we, our approach include helping schools meet those guidelines. So instead of giving them something else to do, we're actually helping them in integrating in stuff that's already happening in the school setting. So we had a lot of back and forth and finally decided to pilot this in one school. And because we had some NME advocates within East Elementary, we decided that was probably the friendliest school to approach. And we did, and we approached the superintendent at Athens City Schools, and we are on board. They're very excited about this idea of helping them work through their PBIS guidelines. And so we are right now putting together sort of a model for this pilot. And it's going to include training and consultation and some research and evaluation so that we can measure what we're doing. And the hope is that we will, you know, get good results, and other schools will want us to replicate this in their school. So stay tuned. This is a brand new project, but we're very excited about it. My final slide here is just, if you want to learn more about how the Map Forward project can help you achieve your mission, here's my contact information. I'd be happy to talk with you just about program development, strategic planning, where we might find resources, how these tools, how our expertise can help you in meeting, you know, towards your mission. So that's really my presentation. I want to open it up for questions, and I want to ask, I don't know if Peggy Garcia and Tiffany Wilson are on board with us today. Tiffany is the Director of Family Children First Council in Fairfield County, and Peggy Garcia is the Director of the Appalachian Children Coalition Prevention Services. And so if they would like to assist in answering questions or have anything they want to add, let's go ahead and move on to our question and answer period. Stop that sharing. Okay. Hi, Peggy. I see you now. Hi, Tiffany. Do you guys want to add anything, or you want to just wait and take questions? How do you want to?
Tammy, I think you covered the Map Forward project at East Elementary pretty well. Like you said, we are in the beginning stages of this. Our pilot is going to be focused at East Elementary, but we are providing training, trauma-informed training for the entire district. We approached the superintendent saying, hey, we want to pilot this at East Elementary. He's like, cool. Let's do it at the whole district because all of my staff need that. So we did expand a little bit. We have our first training scheduled for August, district-wide, and then we are in the plans of picking and choosing and meeting with the school district and East Elementary staff of what is going to be needed, what professional development days are available, and we are hopefully in the process of getting a survey out to all of the staff. The superintendent has had some health issues, so we haven't rolled it out as quickly as we originally planned, to just measure where the staff at the school is to give us a good starting base to then build our trainings off of that. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to that, because I know that was a change from our original proposal.
I'm glad you brought that up, Peggy, because that was exciting when we went there. I mean, no, I want this for the whole district. So thanks for remembering that piece. Is kind of important. Tiffany, did you want to add anything about the Fairfield County project, or you just want to take questions, or what do you want to do?
The only thing that I'll add, similar to what Peggy said, is we had Tammy come speak at our full council meetings to talk about the project. And there were so many people that were interested. So our program is geared towards our families that come through the Family and Children First Council. But we had so many people that were just like, how do I get my kids in this? Like, how do I get the children in our program in this? But, you know, it was through the council at first. And so the pilot program seemed to be, or it got a lot of interest from a lot of other agencies in our community. So we're really excited about it and the things that are happening here. So. But yes, we can take questions.
Thanks, Tiffany. I've stumped them, apparently, Renee.
Hi,
I feel stumped.
I have a few follow-up questions. So I'm Brittany. I'm an outreach case manager at my sister's place, and we serve Athens, Hawking, and Vinton counties. So what would be the best way for referral then? Like for Athens, should we refer them first to the council, or can they be directly referred to your practice, or how should we do that?
So, you know, if you were in Fairfield County, then, you know, you could perhaps go through the Family Children First Council, but I'm assuming that you want to refer a child or an adult?
Either or, because I had another question about adults participating.
Okay, well, let me answer your first question. So, you know, that's one of the reasons these initiatives are kind of important, because it helps us identify resources to pay for these assessments, because it's expensive. And often when children are referred to us, they're either a part of one of these initiatives, or there's an agency like Children's Services or Family Children First Council or some other agency that will pick up the cost of that. So yes, you can refer directly to Albany Counseling Services, but you know, you probably want to get attached to a funding source first. You know, we hope to, you know, we're working with Athens County Children's Services, trying to identify some grants and other funding sources to do more brain maps on more kids that are coming through their system. You know, so, I mean, that might be a grant, Brittany, for my sister's place.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, that's my, and what was your next question?
For folks who are privately insured, that don't have maybe Medicaid, when we check benefits, would we check specifically for the NMT, or would it go under like, you know, therapy or counseling?
No, this is not covered by insurance or Medicaid.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. This is why we really focus on building these initiatives and finding resource, you know, finding grants and other sources for this. Is it's because it's just not covered, and in part because so much of it is done not as part of direct service. You know, putting up together these documents and these recommendations take hours, quite frankly. So it's just not something that is covered, at least through our agency. Others may have found a way to do it. We looked into it very extensively and determined that it was just not going to work. But I'm happy, if you want to give me a call sometime, I'm happy to talk with you about you know, the cost in more detail, what might be some possible options. I know that I used to do some work with my sister's place, and I know that they have several grants that they, you know, maybe we could look at doing something for some of your clients there. So
yeah, thank you. I'll take
thank you,
advantage of
Brittany.
that.
Anybody else have any questions?
I had a question. When a child and a family has done their assessments and you've given their recommendations, how long do those kind of recommendations stay with them, or or is it kind of voluntary at their own discretion? Like, how long would it be before you would like reassess? I know you said you did 6 months and they looked great. Do you also do a year, 2 years? Like, what does that look like for the family and the child?
Well, in an ideal world where we had all the money we needed to do everything we want to do, we would post test, you know, every 6 to 12 months, kind of depending on what's going on with the child, because obviously things change. You know, you know, the developmental history page of that report is not going to change. I mean, that's the history is the history. The current functioning information certainly could change over time, especially with, you know, interventions being put in place. So it's a great way to measure whether or not your interventions are working, to do a post test. And another good time to do a reassessment or a post test would be if the child's circumstances change dramatically. You know, they've been put in a new placement or in a, you know, new school, and suddenly their behaviors are deteriorating. You know, if there's been some dramatic change, that can be a really good time also to do a reassessment. So, you know, we do everything we can, you know, because part of our package, like I said, we do 3 months of follow-up services. This is in addition to the 6-month post test, where we work with the family and the school and the service providers to make sure they understand the document, that they know how to pull their piece out of it and put it into their care plans, that this is really carrying forward in a meaningful way. Do our best to do that.
And when you have families that have, maybe perhaps you started with the one child that was referred, and then you work with the parents or guardians, if there are other children in the home, do you also assess them as well? Or are you just really looking at kind of that that one child in the relationship or functioning with the parents or guardians?
Well, I mean, if we're just assessing the one child, that's the child we're assessing, but we're certainly, when we interview the parents, we're considering the number of children in the home, the needs of those children, and the family dynamics, of course. So, but we would not necessarily come out with specific recommendations for the other children in the family or a metric for the other children in the family. But we might definitely have some ideas under the family therapy section of the therapeutic web for some kind of follow-up family counseling or services.
And to tag on to that, I see Shannon Eads is on. She's our MSY service coordinator. So she's the one who's always working with the families and helping gather all that paperwork and stuff. So if you want to tag on to this, Shannon, feel free. But we do have some families where Shannon thought that it would be best to have both children have a brain map done, which is like, since they're currently going through it, helpful to the family.
Absolutely.
To tag on to Renee, what you were asking about hi Tammy, the longevity, how long it sticks with. One of the things that early on, I fell in love with NMT, and I think it's an amazing tool. But one of the things I love about it is it's also a way for the youth as they age to not only see progress that they've made, but to be able to touch back to things that worked for them well when things were at a heightened point, if they come back to that. It's another way of really learning yourself again, as well as we continue to mature and move forward. It's that reminder of, I may have forgotten what some of the things are, but I have something I can touch back to trigger some of those thoughts again on how I can approach it now for myself as we move forward. And on the family thing, one of the things that they have been wonderful about, like Tiffany said, is when we see that there's a huge impact for an entire family, then those recommendations do mention, for example, an idea of, here's the identified youth, and we've got all of this attention that has been placed here because of his needs. But older sister is actually kind of falling to the wayside, for a lack of a better way of putting it. So let's incorporate, we know we're going to see some huge differences because of just the relational piece. So how do we incorporate the two youth together to build some of those relational bonds again, where they get to just be brother and sister instead of almost a mini caretaker because you're looking out for your younger sibling. So it points out some of these very fun interwoven pieces that come together.
Thank you, Shannon. Shannon is a strong advocate for NMT. Or ambassador, I should say. She's the ambassador for NMT. I've elevated you from advocate to ambassador, Shannon. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll put that on my title card.
Any other questions?
Can you all speak more to the caregiver recommendations and ways you kind of bolster up that caregiver support?
I'll let Shannon or Tiffany answer that. I do know that, I'll just say this piece real quickly. A lot of times when we start assessing kids, they already have some services in place. I would say after we do the assessment, this really intensifies. And I've already mentioned the amazing parenting programs they have going on in Fairfield County. But I'll let Tiffany or Shannon speak to the rest of that.
So part of what we do is every one of them, we tend to offer parent education in multiple different forms that we are able and blessed here at the county council to be able to have at our disposal. So we try to work with the family, the parents, the guardian, grandma and grandpa. Do we want to bring in other family members who are of great support to do some of these classes with them, so that they're all working from a united front, for a lack of a better way of putting it. We find that good fit with them with our parent education coordinator. The recommendations help us also get a better idea, again, that sequential mode, right? We can say, yeah, your child would benefit from therapy, but if they're not at a place where their brain can process that in the way it's intended to, then like Tammy said, it kind of falls on deaf ears. So what other things can we put in place to help bolster some of the lower level stuff so that we can get to a point that these things, and as they start feeling less and less lost with what's available, what might work, we start thinking creatively, then some of that stress and burden comes down almost automatically anyway, because you're not feeling like you're navigating it alone.
It's a great answer, Shannon.
I'll jump in too, just with the piece for Athens City Schools. I know that they want to incorporate some kind of caregiver and parent training and information as well too. We haven't figured out exactly what that's going to look like and how to incentivize families and parents to come to the school or a community center for that training, but that is a piece that we are looking into as well to continue to bolster up the supports in the community as well as at the school.
For us here in Fairfield County, it helps that we're all here at the Family and Children First Council. Like, our parent education is here and Shannon's here, and we have some other programs here as well that maybe some other councils don't have. But it does help that we're all here, because then it's easier for the parent when Shannon says, I'd like to go ahead and refer you, but it's right next door. Let me just call her in here real quick. So it's not like she has to go to a complete different place. But we do try to work in some incentives as much as possible if we can, just to help parents, move them along. So that's kind of nice too. And I know our parent education program has incentives too, so that getting them in there, and then that keeps them going. And then once they go, we can see the benefit, and they can see the benefit of the class as well.
And let me just add quickly that one of the things I did not point out when I was going over these documents with you is that the recommendations are prioritized as either essential, therapeutic, or enhancement. So we can all then go to those essential ones first. And so we may, in fact, be reducing services for, in some cases for some families, and just focusing on the essential. This child needs some OT before we start putting them in a social skills group or summer camps or trying to do cognitive behavioral therapy with them. And so it kind of reorganizes the services, or it organizes the services in a way that makes sense for everyone, including families.
It can sound overwhelming, but we don't want to overwhelm families, and that's a big goal of ours. So we make sure that we're not doing that, or we try our best to make sure that we're not doing that by doing, as Tammy said, and making sure that we're, one step at a time here. So.
I wanted to add on as well, if you'll indulge me, that we look at trauma and those adverse childhood experiences, which are a huge part in any brain development. But we also have through this process with Tammy started looking at also what is the trauma that is associated with being neurodivergent. You're viewing the world differently, you're interacting with the world differently, you are trying to understand the world and yourself. And these things also form how your brain reacts to, or tells you to react to, certain situations. And a lot of times, I know with the youth that Tammy used as the example today, the recommendations from the initial brain map, I think, actually helped caregiver to better understand the neurodivergence and how it truly has impacted the youth's functioning throughout his life. And that made a huge difference, because both very intelligent, but when you grow up thinking of things a certain way, you have a hard time kind of reimagining it. And the document, those recommendations, and seeing your whole team come together around you really does make a huge impact in going, oh, okay, so now I get it better, right? Now I know how moving forward with these things is a benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that Peggy has said in the past that one of the important pieces of this for her was that you're able to talk with service providers and educators and family members about the child's developmental age versus their chronological age. And that makes a huge, and I think that's, segueing off what Shannon said, that makes a huge difference for people. If you have an expectation that a child's going to act a certain way because they're 11, but you know, they're not feeling safe, they're not feeling relationally connected. So actually they're acting more like a 4-year-old, then, you know, you're either going to think that child is being willful because yesterday he did it, or you're going to realize that, you know, what's going on today, this child needs some extra support. And so, yeah, lots we could go on and on about. But I think we're out of time, Renee, unless you want to keep going.
And we have about 9 minutes left. So if there
Oh.
were any other burning questions, or if you wanted to ask any deeper questions about anything, we definitely have the time.
Oh, okay. I thought the whole thing was 45 minutes. I would have talked a lot longer, Renee. Well, wonderful then. Any other questions?
All right. Well, hearing none, I will say that, you know, we just want to say thank you to Tammy and to Peggy and Tiffany and Shannon for joining us today for this webinar. And I think that through this presentation and the conversations that have happened, we can all see how this work can really be beneficial in our prevention space and helping families kind of understand what's going on with their children and their family dynamics, and being able to get the resources that they need before they, you know, get to a critical point where something, you know, has happened and we have to have larger interventions happen. So just, you know, we thank you for that. We know that this is a big, big subject, and that none of us are walking away today being brain mapping experts, but that we hope that this has at least introduced you to this topic if you hadn't heard it before, and just highlighted some of the great innovative work that is going on around the state to really help our children and families just be the best that they can be and have the best, brightest future. And, you know, to ensure they shine, to not be too campaigny, but that is really the goal. And we think that this work is a great example of that work really coming to life. So thank you everyone for attending. We will make sure that at the end of this month, we will have all our webinars up on the website so that you can go back and view them or share them out with your colleagues if you think that they would also be interested in these topics. And we can also make sure that we have Tammy's contact information available so that if you would like to reach out to her to learn more about the subject or to learn how you can bring a project like this to your area.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks, Shannon, Peggy, Tiffany, everyone. Have a great day.